Welcome along to this deep dive.
Hello!
Today, we're going to look at a word that, well, it's tiny, but it can sometimes hold your English back a bit, especially if you're learning. That word is very.
Yeah, very. It's everywhere, isn't it? We've gathered insights from quite a few sources, articles, some research, notes, all really focusing on vocabulary and communication for English learners.
Right.
And our goal here, our mission, let's say, is to help you make your English sound, well, more natural, more precise, and definitely stronger.
Ow.
By exploring what you can use instead of always defaulting to very.
Okay, so if you've ever listened back to yourself or just felt your descriptions are maybe a little bit flat.
Yeah, or repetitive.
Exactly, repetitive. Or you just feel like you want to show off your vocabulary a bit more. Then this deep dive is definitely for you. We're going to look at some simple ways to really boost your speaking and writing.
Let's get into it. So, the very problem, as we're calling it. Look, using very is super common. And it's completely understandable when you're learning English. It's a quick fix for adding emphasis.
Yeah, seems easy enough.
It does. But the sources we reviewed are pretty clear on this. Relying on very too much can actually make your English sound, well, a bit weak.
Weaker. How so?
And less precise, and honestly kind of repetitive after a while.
Okay, like using the same word over and over again, it just loses its impact.
Exactly. It's like putting the same Instagram filter on every photo. Eventually, they all just blend together, don't they? Your language can lose its punch.
Right. But swapping out using different, stronger words, that gives you some real advantages.
Absolutely. The first big one is precision, enhancing precision.
Okay.
Think about, say, very surprising versus astonishing.
Yeah.
Astonishing gives you a much clearer picture. It wasn't just a little bit surprising. It was really surprising, intensely so.
So one word packs more meaning.
Precisely. You convey a clearer degree of intensity.
And that detail, that nuance, makes your English sound, well, more sophisticated.
It does. And it also helps improve fluency.
How does that work?
Well, when you have a range of options, instead of just reaching for very all the time, your sentences tend to flow better, more naturally.
So you're not getting stuck thinking, how do I make this stronger? And just landing on very again.
Exactly that. And this is especially useful, say, in exams or professional situations. It really demonstrates vocabulary depth.
Right, showing you no more words.
Saying something is very good is fine, it works. But saying it's exceptionally good,
Yeah, that sounds better.
or describing someone as remarkably talented, it signals a better command of the language, a better grasp of, subtle differences in meaning.
Okay, so the problem's clear. Overusing very makes us sound repetitive and less precise. How do we actually fix it? Where do these better words come from?
Well, the sources helpfully break down these stronger words, these intensifiers, into three main groups. It gives us a kind of roadmap.
Okay, 3 groups. What are they?
We've got general intensifiers, then context-specific intensifiers, and finally intensifiers that you use with comparatives and superlatives.
Got it. Let's take the first one then. General intensifiers. What are those?
These are your versatile ones, your workhorses. They can partner up with a really wide range of adjectives and adverbs,
Okay.
especially words that we call gradable,
Gradable, meaning
meaning they can have different degrees or levels, like good. You can be a bit good, quite good, very good, extremely good, or happy or tired.
right, things that exist on a scale.
Exactly. And the sources gave a great list for these. For really strong emphasis, you've got words like absolutely, completely, totally, utterly.
Absolutely brilliant or completely wrong.
Yeah, or totally convinced, utterly devastated, things like that.
Okay. What else falls into this general category?
There are loads. Things like extremely, incredibly, remarkably, also especially, particularly, and highly.
So you could say extremely cold, incredibly interesting, remarkably accurate.
Or especially useful, particularly relevant, highly recommended.
And I think the sources mentioned a few more, something about deeper feelings.
Yes, words like profoundly, deeply, truly, and even wonderfully.
So profoundly moving, deeply upsetting, truly grateful.
Wonderfully creative. Yeah. The main tip from the sources here is pretty straightforward. Just pair these general intensifiers with the adjective or adverb you want to boost.
So instead of very interesting?
Maybe extremely interesting or incredibly interesting.
Or instead of very tired?
Absolutely exhausted or completely wiped out even. It just adds so much more color and intensity.
It really does. Okay, that makes sense for general use.
Yeah.
What about category 2, context-specific intensifiers? You said this is where it gets trickier.
Yeah, this is often where learners might make mistakes without realizing it because these words are pickier.
Pickier how?
They don't just work with any adjective. They have preferred partners, words they commonly appear with. It's all about collocation.
Collocation words that naturally go together in English.
Exactly, like best friends who are always seen together.
Yeah.
Using them with the wrong friend just sounds off, unnatural.
Okay, can you give us some examples from the sources? Why do they only work with certain words? Is it a grammar rule?
It's less a strict rule, more about common usage patterns, how the language has developed. Take dangerously, for instance.
Okay.
You hear dangerously icy roads or dangerously close to the edge.
Right, because ice and closeness can imply danger.
Exactly. The intensifier fits the potential meaning. But you wouldn't really say dangerously happy.
No, that sounds weird.
The pairing just doesn't work. It's not a standard collocation.
Okay, the meaning has to align. What about bitterly? That sounds quite negative.
It is. The sources link bitterly strongly with negative feelings or conditions. You're bitterly disappointed.
Or bitterly cold.
Yes. But you wouldn't be bitterly delighted. Again, wrong partner.
Got it. And highly. You mentioned that in the general list too, but is it also context specific?
It kind of straddles both. But it definitely has specific context where it's most common, often with achievements, probabilities, opinions.
Like?
Highly effective, highly likely, highly recommended, highly intelligent.
Okay. But you wouldn't say.
You wouldn't say highly tall or highly tasty. It just doesn't collocate like that.
One more example was seriously.
Right. Often used for negative things like damage or illness.
Seriously injured. Seriously damaged.
Exactly. You wouldn't really use seriously happy to mean very happy in standard English, maybe informally, but the common collocation is with negative states.
This is really important. So how does a learner know which context-specific word fits? If it's not a clear rule, just common usage.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the sources give very practical advice here.
Which is?
Check. Don't guess. Use a good Lanner's dictionary or a dedicated collocation dictionary or online tool.
So look up the adjective, like disappointed, and see if bitterly is listed as a common intensifier for it.
Precisely. If you're unsure if, say, deeply successful works or highly cold sounds right, look it up. Don't just assume. This step is vital for sounding natural.
That's a fantastic, actionable tip. Check your collocations. Okay, on to the third category. Intensifiers with comparatives and superlatives.
Right. So this is when you're comparing things, saying something is more interesting or less expensive or the most difficult.
And we use different words here, not the ones we've just discussed.
Generally, yes. When you're intensifying a comparison, you're emphasizing the difference between things. So saying very bigger or very more expensive just sounds wrong in English.
Yeah, I've definitely heard learners make that mistake. It's an easy one to make. So what should we use before a comparative adjective like bigger or more useful?
The sources point to words like much, far, or a lot.
Oh.
So this book is much more interesting than the last one. Or my new phone is far better. Or this bag is a lot lighter.
So much, far, a lot. Emphasize the degree of difference.
Exactly. They intensify the comparison itself.
Okay. And what about superlatives? Like the best, the tallest, the most important. Can we intensify those?
You can. You're essentially saying it's the best or tallest or whatever by a significant margin. The most common way to do this is with by far.
By far.
Yeah. She is by far the most talented musician in the group, or that was by far the worst meal I've ever had.
Okay, by far for superlatives. So the big mistake to avoid here is putting very before comparative.
Definitely. Use much bigger or far bigger, never very bigger. Simple rule, but crucial.
Right. So we've got the categories, lots of examples. Now, how do we use these effectively in everyday speech or writing without sounding like we just swallowed the dictionary?
Good question. The sources offer some really practical pointers for sounding natural. First up, and it connects back to something we touched on, Match the intensifier to the type of adjective.
You mean the gradable versus non-gradable thing again?
Exactly. Remember, gradable adjectives like hot, happy, expensive exist on a scale. You can use intensifiers like extremely, incredibly, or even very with these.
Extremely hot, incredibly happy. Makes sense.
But then you have non-gradable or absolute adjectives. Words like perfect, unique, dead, impossible, finished.
Right. Things that are either on or off. You can't be a bit dead.
Precisely. And you can't be very perfect or extremely unique. Using very with these absolute adjectives is just incorrect.
Okay, so no very with absolute adjectives. What about other intensifiers? Can you say absolutely unique?
You can. Words like absolutely or completely can sometimes be used with certain absolute adjectives, like absolutely perfect or completely finished. You hear it quite a bit.
Right.
But the sources also advise caution, especially in more formal writing. Often the absolute adjective is strong enough by itself. The result was perfect. Saying absolutely perfect can sometimes feel a bit redundant or overly emphatic in formal contexts.
So unique often just means unique, full stop.
Often, yes. It's a subtle point, but important for more advanced or formal use.
Okay. What about placement? Where do these intensifiers usually go?
Generally, right before the word, they're modifying the adjective or adverb.
Like remarkably quickly or deeply concerned.
Exactly. She was absolutely confident. It was an extremely difficult decision. Pretty straightforward most of the time. Some words like so or to also fit right before I'm so tired, it's too expensive.
And we definitely need to think about formality, right?
Oh, absolutely. The intensifier you choose sends a signal about the context.
So words like extremely, particularly highly, are safer for essays or professional emails.
Generally, yes. They're more neutral or standard. You'd probably save the more informal or slang ones like super, wicked, maybe hella, depending on where you are for casual chats.
Right. Wouldn't want hella important in a job application.
Probably not. And the last tip is really simple. Avoid redundancy. Don't pile them up.
Meaning one intensifier is usually enough.
Yes. Saying something like it was completely very awful is just overkill and sounds strange. Pick one strong word. Completely awful is plenty. Or even just awful, since it's already a strong adjective.
Okay, good point. So let's quickly revisit the common mistakes learners might make, just to reinforce them based on the sources.
Sure. A big one we touched on is using very with already strong adjectives.
Like very huge or very freezing.
Exactly. Words like huge, tiny, brilliant, awful, excellent, furious, exhausted, they already contain the idea of very. Huge means very big. Furious means very angry. Adding very is unnecessary and weakens the strong adjective.
So just use a strong word. Enormous, brilliant, exhausted.
Right. Or find an even stronger synonym if needed.
And the second mistake relates to those context-specific words.
Pairing incompatible intensifiers and adjectives. That's the collocation error again.
Like saying bitterly happy.
Exactly. Or highly tall, or maybe deeply easy. You've got to remember those common partnerships and check if you're unsure.
Don't guess. Check. Got it. Then there's overusing intensifiers in general.
Yeah, just like overusing very is repetitive. Throwing absolutely, incredibly, totally into every single sentence makes your speech sound exaggerated or, frankly, a bit insincere after a while.
Moderation is key.
Use them for impact, not constantly.
And the final mistake area was about those absolute adjectives again.
Right. Adding an intensifier incorrectly. Primarily using very with words like perfect, unique, impossible. That's just wrong.
And even with words like absolutely or completely.
While sometimes okay, especially informally, remember that in formal writing, these absolute words often sound strongest standing alone. The project is finished. Not necessarily the project is completely finished.
Great summary of the pitfalls. Now, to really see the difference, let's look at those side-by-side comparisons the sources provide.
Yeah, these really highlight the improvement.
Okay, so instead of the standard, the movie was very good. What's a stronger alternative?
You could say the movie was exceptionally good.
Ooh, nice.
That's
That's much more descriptive.
Okay.
Okay.
About
She's very talented.
maybe. She's remarkably talented.
Yeah, remarkably adds that sense of surprise or specialness.
Okay.
It was very cold last night.
A simple upgrade. It was extremely cold last night.
Stronger, clearer, and the one we talked about with negative feelings. I'm very disappointed.
The classic collocation. I'm bitterly disappointed.
You can almost feel that one more. It has more emotional weight.
It really does.
And finally, using an intensifier with a comparative, instead of just, this book is much more interesting.
You could make it even stronger. This book is far more interesting.
These examples really drive the point home. Choosing a more precise intensifier or using a stronger adjective on its own makes such a difference.
It really does. Moving beyond just relying on very isn't about banning the word entirely.
No, of course not.
It's about unlocking a richer way to express yourself. When you start using a wider range of intensifiers, the general ones, the context-specific ones, the comparative ones, your English automatically becomes more precise, more colorful, more natural.
So the key takeaways are: use diverse intensifiers, make sure you pair them correctly, especially those tricky context-specific ones.
Check your dictionary.
Check your dictionary. Avoid overuse, think about formality, and know the difference between gradable and non-gradable adjectives.
Exactly. It might feel like a bit of effort at first, but with some conscious practice, you'll find your descriptions hitting the mark much more effectively. Your English will sound more sophisticated.
So here's a little challenge, maybe, a thought to take away from our deep dive today.
Okay.
Just for this week, try to notice how often you hear or use the word very in conversations, emails, whatever, and then just once, try consciously swapping it out. Replace it with a stronger adjective or a different intensifier from one of the categories we discussed. See how it feels. Does your sentence sound clearer? Does it sound stronger?
It's a small change, but honestly, focusing on these kinds of details can make a really noticeable difference in how fluent and natural your English comes across.